What an amazing start we've had to the second half of the Candidates tournament, resumed after over a year's break. And we're back where we were in Yekaterinburg last year. And I tell you what, it's just been a great start. So I'm going to take you through the top two games. First of all, let's have a look at Ian Nepomniachtchi against Anish Giri. Nepo, of course, leading the tournament by a point. Giri a point behind. Let's see what they've concocted after a year's preparation. Nepo with e4. Okay, that's nothing special for him. And an open Sicilian. Well, this is interesting because Giri plays a Sveshnikov variation. Now that from him is a little bit unexpected. No Berlin, no Najdorf, well, no Scheveningen. Well, to me, this looks like the sincerest form of flattery. Giri has realised that the Sveshnikov is a very decent opening. Magnus has had success with this over the last couple of years. Well, not just Magnus, but many other players, and it is deemed to be a very respectable variation by the top players. Very hard for White to get an advantage against this. And Giri has obviously been doing his homework. So a little bit of a surprise, but actually a very good option. So we have knight b5. And then, well, we saw many games with knight d5. Played a few games played by Caruana, but after that, after the World Championship in 2018, quite a few of Magnus's opponents tried knight d5 and did not do very well. So that's out of favour with White. Instead, Nepo, after 3.5 minutes thought, goes for bishop g5, which is, the main line basically. So pawn to a6, that knight has to be pushed away. And the knight comes back to a3. And black exploits the poor positioning of that knight on a3 by pushing b5. And here, well, when I was playing the Sveshnikov variation in the 1970s, the late 70s, when it was really burst onto the scene, completely new system, popularized by the Soviet player Yevgeny Sveshnikov and others from Chelyabinsk. In Russia, it's called the Chelyabinsk variation. In those days, the main line was to exchange and then f5, and now it got absolutely crazy. You can play bishop d3 here, but great fun was to be had with this piece sacrifice, and then rook a4 was the most popular response. I mean, absolutely crazy positions arose, after things like this. Mad variations. But in the 1990s, basically, a lot of players cottoned on to this move, bishop g7 instead of f5. Now the sacrifices aren't very good. And actually, after this and castles and only later f5, this was turned into a very respectable system for black. So, well, instead of these sharp lines of the bishop takes knight, Nepo played a more positional way, knight d5. Bishop e7 and exchange on f6. And this is how, a game between Giri and Carlsen went a couple of years ago in Vachier, the last round of Vachier. Rook b8, good move. You want to support this pawn, sometimes pushing with b4. Knight c2, and this knight spins back into the game. And bishop g5. Now, this is very well known. The bishop moves to a good diagonal, and this bishop actually plays a very important role in this position. Covering key squares here and looking at the e3 square in case a knight goes there, and often you just exchange it off. And here, well, that game between Giri and Carlsen went bishop e2, which is the old main line. And actually, Giri got no advantage with white whatsoever. In fact, Carlsen could even have got a little bit of advantage there, but last round Carlsen only needed a draw. Now instead of that, Nepo played g3, a little bit a trendier move, and then h4, pushing the bishop back, and then a3, so solidly blocking b4, also looking to play knight b4 and recapture with the a pawn. That's quite nice. So a5 is a good move, and sometimes you want to try and break here, but at the moment, well, there's too many pieces covering that. And here, well, we've seen, well, other moves. Bishop g2 has been played before, but queen d3 played by Nepo. After a big think, 17 minutes, he was obviously slightly wrong-footed by Giri's opening choice. But queen d3 is pretty sensible. Perhaps looking to bring the rook to d1. So knight e7. This is where the battle occurs in this opening variation. Around that knight on d5. So black is hoping to exchange that off. White supports that knight, and now you can see the importance of playing that bishop out to this diagonal. Black exchanges off. And, well, these kind of pawn structures, I mean, that's already better for black because you've got this fantastic attack by pushing the f-pawn. So knight takes has to be played. But now you can see how, well, that knight can't go back into d5. Same problem, that black just gets a superb position. You know, that's a dead point, and this is a very powerful kingside pawn majority. So rook d1, attacking the pawn, that's no problem. Rook b6. This is such a typical position for the Sveshnikov. Now, Giri decides to preserve that bishop, which means he still retains control over that d5 square. So that knight can't enter there, or ought not to enter there anyway. So Giri has come out of the opening very well. This, I think we can count his opening as a success. This pawn is well protected. There's potential perhaps to use that queenside pawn majority. I mean, I would say it's about equal. In this position, I think black needs about 4 different rooks. You need a rook here, here, and here. That's the only thing. Where do you station the rook? Well, Giri put it to b8. He could also play a very simple way of playing bishop c4, which forces an exchange. The queen goes back, and then double rooks on the b file. I like that. And I think it's very difficult for either side to make progress in this position, actually, because both sides are going to be tied to their one weakness, and I think the position is just equal, basically. But Giri played rook b8 straight away, and after rook c1, well, black is a little bit stuck for moves. That's the only thing. Then again, it's very hard for white to do anything. h6 played, giving the king an escape square later on. And now, well, bishop d1. I think it would be advantageous for white to exchange off that bishop. That would give white greater control here. But of course, it's not necessary to exchange. Bishop e6 from Giri. That is such a good piece on e6. And Nepo offered an exchange again. And again, that was declined. And yes, they looked into each other's eyes, and a draw by repetition. There we go. It's interesting. Carlsen, he was commentating on Chess24. He said, you should play on as white. There's no risk. Okay, typical Carlsen. Wants to squeeze something from the position. Well, let's just have a little look at this position. Instead of bishop g4, which ended up in a draw. Carlsen was looking at b4. Now, if this is exchanged, then I agree. I think, there is potential to play here against this pawn. But a4 looks like a better move. And again, it's very hard for white to do anything here. And if bishop g4, well, that bishop can sit back on b3. It's a nice square, securely protected. Well, I was thinking instead of b4, maybe h5, just to gain a bit of space. And, well, black doesn't want to break like this because of c4, and I think white is quite okay there. But again, I think bishop c4 I like. Pushing the queen back, and then b4 is possible. So I think making any headway here in this position is extremely difficult for white. And I can understand why Nepo actually just thought, okay, I'm satisfied with the draw. Black's position is rock solid. And of course, we have to remember Nepo is a point clear. So a draw is not a bad result for him. He neutralizes Giri basically by doing this. Giri is still a point behind him. So a draw for Nepo is not a bad result at all. After the round, Anish Giri said with typical wit, I did have 1 year to find an advantage for black after 1e4, and I have to say, I need a little bit more time. Absolutely. We should look at it from black's viewpoint as well. Giri can't do anything with black here. He just has to sit there. And in fact, you could say with the black pieces, this is a decent outcome for him, a draw in this game. So there we go. I will be looking at the other top game between Fabiano Caruana and Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, and amazing things happened in that game. So look out for my recording a little bit later.